Here's something most people get wrong about GDPR. They think it's a European problem. But if you have even one customer in the EU, sell to EU residents, or track visitors from Europe on your website, this law applies to you, no matter where your company is headquartered. That single fact has caught thousands of businesses off guard, including companies based right here in India that assumed GDPR was someone else's problem, only to discover an EU regulator disagreed rather firmly. So, what exactly is GDPR? It's the General Data Protection Regulation, the toughest privacy law in the world when it came into force back in 2018, and it fundamentally changed how organizations everywhere handle personal data. By the end of this video, you will understand the 7 core principles that anchor this law, the lawful bases you need to process data, what rights individuals have, and how breach notification and penalties actually work in practice. Think of GDPR as the blueprint that most modern privacy laws, including India's own DPDP Act, borrowed heavily from. Once you understand GDPR, every other privacy law you encounter afterward starts making a lot more sense. Let's dive in. Let's talk about the 7 core principles, because everything else in GDPR flows from these. Lawfulness, fairness, and transparency come first, meaning you process data legally and tell people exactly what you're doing with it, no hidden agendas. Then, purpose limitation. You collect data for a specific reason and don't quietly repurpose it for something else later. Here's a real example. Imagine a fitness app that collects your heart rate data to track workouts, then suddenly starts selling that data to insurance companies. That's a textbook violation of purpose limitation, and users would rightly feel betrayed. Next comes data minimization. Only collect what you actually need, not everything you could possibly gather. Accuracy means keeping data correct and updated. Storage limitation means not hoarding data forever. There has to be a retention clock. Integrity and confidentiality is about keeping data secure. And accountability means you can prove you're following all of this, not just claim it. When I consulted for a pharma client, we discovered they were storing patient trial data indefinitely with no deletion policy. Just fixing that storage limitation gap took months. So ask yourself, could your organization actually demonstrate accountability today, on paper, if asked? Now let's break down lawful basis, because you cannot process personal data under GDPR without one, ever. There are 6 of them, but let's focus on the ones you'll encounter most often. Consent is the one everyone knows, but it has to be freely given and specific, not a pre-ticked box buried in terms and conditions. Then there's contract. If processing data is necessary to fulfill a contract with someone, like shipping a product they ordered, you don't need separate consent. Legal obligation covers situations where a law requires you to process data. Think tax reporting. Legitimate interest is the trickiest one. It lets you process data when you have a genuine business reason that doesn't override the individual's rights. Here's an analogy that helps. Think of lawful bases like different keys on a keyring. You don't use the same key for every door. You pick the right one for the right situation. I once worked with an e-commerce client who was using consent for basic order fulfillment data when contract was actually the correct and much simpler basis. Getting this right isn't just a legal technicality. It genuinely simplifies your compliance work. Let's look at individual rights, because this is where GDPR really empowers people. There's the right to access. Anyone can ask what data you hold on them. The right to rectification lets them correct inaccurate data. Then there's the right to erasure, often called the right to be forgotten, which lets someone ask you to delete their data under certain conditions. Imagine someone closes their account with an online retailer and later discovers, years later, that the company still emails them targeted ads using old browsing data. Under GDPR, they can demand that data be erased, and the company must comply within a set time frame. There's also the right to data portability, letting people take their data with them to another service, similar to how you can switch banks and transfer your transaction history. And the right to object, which lets individuals stop certain types of processing like direct marketing at any time. Here's a question worth thinking about. If a customer emailed your organization today asking for a full export of their data, how long would it actually take your team to respond? Under GDPR, you typically have 30 days, not 30 weeks. Let's finish with breach notification and penalties, because this is where GDPR really gets serious. If a personal data breach occurs, organizations must notify the relevant supervisory authority within 72 hours of becoming aware of it, and in many cases, notify affected individuals too. That's an incredibly tight window when you consider how chaotic the first few hours after discovering a breach usually are. And the penalties reflect how seriously this law is enforced. Fines can reach 20 million euros or 4% of a company's global annual turnover, whichever is higher. We've seen major tech companies hit with fines running into hundreds of millions of euros. So, where do you start with compliance? Map your data flows, identify your lawful bases, build a breach response plan you can actually execute in 72 hours, and train your team regularly. If you want a detailed, structured course on this topic, complete with role plays, quizzes, and practice tests, our GDPR Mastery course on Udemy covers every one of these areas in depth. Link is in the description. Don't forget to subscribe and check out our GDPR Master Series playlist below for more on this law. So let's take a breath and look at how far we've come together. 7 principles, 6 lawful bases, individual rights, breach rules. That's the skeleton of GDPR. But here's a question for you. Do you think knowing the skeleton is the same as knowing the body? When I worked on a GDPR project for a pharma client, everyone in the room could recite the principles. The struggle started when we had to decide which lawful basis fit a real marketing campaign. That's where depth matters. So where do you go from here? Head over to our GDPR Master Series playlist on this channel. Each episode picks one topic like DPIAs or data subject requests and unpacks it the way a practitioner actually uses it. You'll find the playlist link in the description below. And if you'd rather follow a complete structured journey with role plays, quizzes, and practice tests to check yourself along the way, our Udemy course, Mastering Data Privacy GDPR Fundamentals, is linked in the description as well. Do subscribe to the channel and turn on notifications because new privacy content lands here every week. See you in the next video.